Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Art After Hours online here at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. My name's Benjamin Law, and I'm really honoured to be here with you on Gadigal land. The Gadigal of this great Eora Nation, where we currently are at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, is the First Nations land where we're currently on. First Nations Australians, like the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, have been making art, sharing knowledge here for tens of thousands of years, together the oldest continuing civilisations this planet has ever seen, and we are particularly grateful to elders past and present that we can continue making art and sharing knowledge here on what is and what will always be Aboriginal land. Art After Hours is a weekly talk series where you'll hear from artists, thinkers and celebrities in conversation as we explore themes and artworks from the exhibitions currently on display at the gallery. And right now, of course, we are talking about the Archibald Prize, Australia's favourite art award. Every year since 1921, artists have entered the Archibald Prize with portraits of politicians, people from business, people from sport, people from the arts and more. It's really the who's who of Australian culture. And in this series of live online conversations, we're going to go behind the scenes to find out this year's stories behind the canvases. Our guest tonight is a Wongutha Yamatji man, actor and playwright, best known for his roles on shows like Neighbours and Redfern Now, and for his debut award-winning play, City of Gold, a monologue of which you might remember going viral earlier this year when he performed it on ABC TV's Q&A. And now he is also the winner of this year's Packing Room Prize at the Archibald with his self-portrait, which also makes him the first ever Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person ever to win any of the prizes offered here at the Archibald Prize. Meyne Wyatt, congratulations.
Ah, thank you.
Now, I want you to confirm a rumour for us. Is it true that you actually painted this painting kind of on a whim?
Yeah, so obviously COVID-19 happened and then we all went into lockdown.
True. So while some people started making sourdough, kimchi, fermenting food, you did what, painting?
Yeah, well I hadn't painted in over 10 years and I wanted to get back into it, but I think because life, and my career had gotten away over that, 10-year span, so I wanted to get back into it at some point and then, this was an opportunity to, so I went and got a canvas and some paint and then I just started because it was like a COVID project and then as I was going along, my mum gave me the nudge to, enter it into the Archibald.
So we all know you kind of as an actor. Several of us have perhaps seen your play. So you're an actor and a playwright. And now, of course, you're an award-winning painter. But you said with this particular painting, you hadn't painted in 10 years. So I guess that implies you were painting before. So where did painting fit into your life?
So my mum's an artist. And so painting had always been in my life because, she was a prolific artist from, her early days when going to art school in, the 70s. And then she'd become an illustrator and then a sign writer and then portrait and landscape painting and doing, big murals all over Western Australia. It was something that was always in my life and, from, a kid, we was always a part of Mum's projects, especially when those big community projects. And then from then, I kind of just started painting, around the house and then painting for my uncles and aunties and stuff. And then going into high school, that's when I started to, get more serious with it. And then I think for a year 12, for art and class or whatever, we had to put a self-portrait up. So I already had done a self-portrait and then it got selected into the Gallery of Western Australia. And so then after that, out of all of those paintings, out of all those year 12 students, I think the exhibition was called The Perspectives, my painting got sent to Japan and went on exhibition there for a couple of weeks. So me and my mum travelled over and it was exhibiting over there for a little while. So
wow, okay, so the news story with your win this year is just like Meyne Wyatt, first time, at the Archibald, really first time. You've actually got a bit of a track record having your art selected and, being exhibited internationally. You can say that.
Oh, look, it was an exciting thing at the time because I was 17, 18,
Yeah.
and we went overseas with that particular, and it was a self-portrait because I had to do it a part of school. Like in WA you say TEE, but I think over here is HSC. So it was a part of my exams. So and then we were able to it was able to be exhibited overseas.
I mean, if I was a teenager who had a painting of mine exhibited overseas, there would be a big part of me that would be considering painting seriously as a career. Was that something that crossed your mind?
I think once I finished school, there was like a fork in the road, and that was a three-pronged fork because there was the acting, and then I was really interested in sport at the time, so it was the broadcasting and journalism, sports journalism, that I wanted to go down as well, and then there was the art, pursuing an art career. And I think once I decided, like the acting thing had a time limit, and if I didn't get in early, then it was going to be harder to get back. Well, if I wanted to pursue that area, and then I felt, I went to Whopper and did the Aboriginal theatre course there, which was a 1-year course, and I was like, it's not going to help the broadcasting thing. So I tried this, and then it seemed to, work out.
Yeah, so this was kind of your sliding doors moment.
Yeah.
And really, when you look back, on your pursuit to becoming the Renaissance man of actor, playwright, artist, visual artist, I mean, sports broadcaster on the horizon, maybe. So if there are any, sports broadcasters out there looking for someone who could comment on what kind of sports in particular?
It was AFL because I was in WA, and that was the big.
Okay, one more to go. one more Pokemon to collect.
Yeah.
So let's go back to this painting and you working on it. You mentioned that it was like a COVID era project. Does that mean I'm right to assume that when lockdown happened, the first lockdown, that this was a pretty grim time for someone in the performing arts?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I was in a show in Brisbane. There was a collab between Queensland Theatre Company and Sydney Theatre Company. So I was meant to do a season in Brisbane and then come down to Sydney and do a season here. But what happened was we'd rehearsed for however many weeks, 5 weeks or something like that. We got into preview in Brisbane, and I think it was only a matter of time because everywhere in the world was starting to go into lockdown, and we kind of suspected that it was going to, we did the first 2 previews, and then we were meant to have the opening night on the Thursday, and it was on Monday morning that, Lee Lewis and the Queensland Theatre Company came in, and we all knew what the conversation was going to be, so we had to cancel our show, Triple X. So that had been postponed till, I think they're looking at putting it on next year. But yeah, look, it was one of those things where we'd done all this work, and then it was kind of demoralising, I suppose, when we got to that point. So once we came back to Sydney, I think the art was kind of getting back into painting was almost, probably cathartic or something, because I hadn't done it for so long. And I think once we got into that, I think the process of painting I liked more than probably the end result. Because I was enjoying it so much.
Yeah.
And that's why I went through so many, I was like, oh, do I finish it here? No, we'll paint a little bit more. Do I finish it here? Do I paint a little bit more? So, yeah, I think the act of doing it was probably more satisfying than the end result.
And tell me a bit about the process, because if we go onto your Instagram page, we can actually see that the end result, this portrait that you've painted that's won the Packing Room Prize, this is not necessarily the first iteration or the first version of this painting that you did. So lead us through how you came to the final portrait and how many takes of it that you did.
Well, so I was painting off a picture of an image that I'd, a photographer had taken of me, and then I had that as, inspiration for this piece. And I think slowly but surely, there was different. I was tossing up between what colours I would use, which way of what style I'd paint the piece. And I think as I was going along, I was just pretty much making up as I was going along. But I kind of, which I think some people have noticed that there is a similarity between the colours and the earthy colours that I've used with this painting is almost, in a way, paying homage to my mother. And I don't know if that was an intentional thing or, a conscious thing. I think I'd always been inspired by my mum's art. So I think with this one, you could see me almost paying homage to my mum in that way, that I was using a similar palette to what she would use.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think with this, I was tossing up between do I go a little bit out there with it, or is this the first painting and I'm just slowly getting back into it kind of thing? So I think I went with the latter,
It's one thing to paint another subject, it's another thing to sit for a painting, and here you're painting a self-portrait of your face over and over again. Yep. And I'm curious, is there something about that act in and of itself that makes you discover things about yourself, things about your face that you hadn't really noticed before?
I'm incredibly vain.
And handsome.
No, I think it was...
Because I imagine for some artists that might be a confronting thing, to look at your face over and over again and to really, really dig deep. Like, photography is one thing, but to paint and to summon your own image over and over again, what's that like?
Yeah, look, for me, I think more than anything, I wanted to get a likeness there. I wanted to make sure that you could recognise that it was me being painted. So I didn't want it to be like photorealism style, because I don't think I'm really that equipped for that style, and I wanted some artistic license a little bit, and I wanted to have like this was an interpretation of me. But I think there was no particular story with it other than just me wanting to, I wanted to get a likeness, and, it was something that I kind of, as long as you could notice it was me, it was the warmth in the darkness, I suppose, if you wanted to make it figurative.
You're talking about using the kind of palette and the colour schema that your mum's known for. Let's talk about your mum for a bit, because your mum's Susan, is that right? Susan Wyatt? She's an artist, and as you mentioned, a really quite renowned and accomplished artist. And her portrait of Doris Pilkington, also known as Ngugi Garamara, was an Archibald finalist in 2003. Pilkington was the author of Follow the Rabbit-Proof Fence, which was later made into the Philip Noyce film, Rabbit-Proof Fence. I'm curious, your mum's an artist and she had that kind of landmark painting for which she's quite known now. Do you remember that period of her being a finalist for the Archibald Prize, and what did that mean to her and your family?
Oh, it was incredibly exciting. I think for Mum to be acknowledged on that national level, because she'd been a prolific artist over many years at that point especially, I think, look, it was exciting for our family. We were really proud, and Mum was on a national level, and I was only like 14 at the time. So it was, like, Mum was the hero, I think she'd always been nurturing of us kids, and she'd sacrificed things in her career that she brought us up, and, she was a stay-at-home mum, and also working with her career and other jobs that she was doing at the same time. So it was a great acknowledgement for her and for our family, I think.
So when you started painting this portrait, was she, as much as she was guiding you through her palette, and there was that, was she also explicitly guiding you in other ways? Did you ask her for advice?
Yeah, no, there was times where I'd send progress pics that I would take on my phone, and then I'd send it back to her, and she'd be like, oh yeah, you can use this, try this out, and so I think I was tossing at one point whether I wanted to paint with oil, and I'd never really painted with oil, so I did, and then I went, oh, this is going to be incredibly shit, so I pulled out and went, let's go with good old acrylic. Yeah. So I think there was there was a point where she led me going, stick to what you know at the moment, because it's the first painting you've done in a while, but at the same time she was like, well, go on. Look, Mum's always been that instigator to be, be courageous and be a bit bold.
Yeah. What was her reaction to you winning the Packing Room Prize.
Look.
How did you convey the news to her?
Well, she was, when I told her I was a finalist, she was incredibly excited. And then once I told her that I'd won the Packing Room, she was like, "What?" Like it was. She was incredibly proud and incredibly excited. But my brothers and sisters was like, "How are you getting away with this?"
I was about to say, like, how much of the family reaction is like pride and excitement, and how much of that pie chart is what?
Yeah,
like, and also, like, isn't this mum's thing?
Yeah, for sure. And I think they were letting me know that it was like you're following in mum's footsteps because, as siblings do, it's always,
It's your responsibility to rib you.
Yeah. And I'm the youngest too, so, and because I live over here and, I think my shit doesn't stink, they're constantly telling me that it does.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, as we're talking about your family, I'm also thinking about your dad, your late father, Brian, and he's this giant in native title work in Australia. He ran the Goldfields Land and Sea Council before heading the National Native Title Council. Like, he's a huge figure in that history and that work. And your play, City of Gold, we talked about the monologue of that and how it went viral on Q&A. That's an award-winning play. And it was written in, I guess, the aftermath of you losing your father. What do you think your dad would make of all of this?
I think it'd be proud, but at the same time, he'd be like, "What are you doing, boy?"
What do you mean by that?
Look, we always had a playful relationship, and he'd always be giving me crap, and I'd be giving him crap. So our family's a bit cheeky like that. But I think it'd be proud. It was, and like just making sure that I'm going down every avenue that I could possibly, could. And be successful in that, because I think when I was going into acting, he was a bit cautious at first. He because it's not a very high employment rate, and I think every parent has that, thinks about security at some point for their children. So I think on the acting path, he'd always been like, okay, well then, and once I started to get work, he was a bit more vocal about him being proud, or in front of his friends as well. So I think this would just be another thing for him to brag about for himself. Look what I did. So no, like in a playful way, I think Dad would be happy about that.
It's been such a big news story this year because you are the Packing Room Prize winner of 2020. But beyond that, there's this extra significance because, you're the first Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander person to win any of the prizes on offer. When that made headlines, everyone was having a big discussion about the significance of that. The first time in the Archibald's 99-year history. We know we get a sense of what that means for the prize, for the art world. What does that mean for you?
Oh, look, I had no idea that I was the first in 99 years. And I think it was, two sides, I think one side I was incredibly happy about that and, it was exciting, but at the same time I was like, well, why did it take so long, and why weren't these artists that came before me who'd been, in their career for so long and putting pieces forward that hadn't been acknowledged, Why was I the person that came, before all of these people?
Because there have been quite prominent subjects of the Archibald who are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, but no artists. I mean, this year as well, obviously we've got Vincent Namatjira, who's won the big prize with his kind of self-portrait and portrait of Adam Good. So it's a real banner year, obviously, and beyond that, for the first time, nearly 50% of the finalists this year are First Nations people. Do you think this represents like a turning point or a significant shift in the art world?
I think it should. Look, with anything, I think, there's always a certain optimism about that I have. I'm a pragmatist at the same time, so when, I don't want to be negative about anything, but hopefully that opens the door for other artists to, be able to put on their work and be acknowledged on this national stage. And for young people especially, I think that you can come into these spaces and take up space, you know.
And do you hope that it might reframe for non-Indigenous people the idea of what Aboriginal art is or could be?
I don't know. I think Indigenous art has been such a forefront of you know, the arts world culture that I think this is just another step on that journey. I wouldn't say it's at the forefront. I think we have so many talented artists and so many artists that are you know, prolonging the culture that has been here for, you know, as you say, over tens of thousands of years.
Yeah.
And who's still celebrating that style and that aesthetic and that work and telling story and culture through that.
And now, because you're very much on your way to becoming a Renaissance man, where does painting fit with you know, your art practice now, with how you're spending your time? Are you still painting at the moment?
I actually haven't. I think I did this one and I went, okay, I'm going to sit back for a little bit, but we'll see how much this one sells for. And then, we'll see how we go after that. No,
And there are other versions of the painting if you want to buy those.
Yeah. Look, I'd love to. I had such a good time this year painting this one that I can't wait to get back into it.
You've painted yourself for this particular painting. Is there anyone on your dream list who you'd love to sit down for you to paint for future sessions?
Look, I like people with a lot of character. So I'd have to go with someone who's got a very recognisable face. I do like portraiture, but maybe I'll try landscape. I don't know. Like whatever I think. I'm the kind of person that I never plan things. Things just pop out of nowhere, and I like this, and then I go, oh well, we'll see how we go. But you know, I can't say there's a particular person, but you know, yeah. We'll never know. See what happens.
You've gotten a chance to look at the Archibald yourself and see the finalists this year. As you look around, do you have any particular favourites that stand out to you? And you know, is there anything about this year's that really resonates with you in terms of who's been chosen?
Oh, look, like you were saying before, over 50% of Indigenous artists have been under just.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah. No, that's been really exciting. I like, you know, Black Douglas's work. But then I like Vincent's work as well. But then there's also Abdul Abdallah. You know, like I love his work as well. There's so many artists in throughout the exhibition that, you know, have caught my eye, but for different reasons too. There's no particular aesthetic that I like. I think there's also whatever I see that I go, oh yeah, and you know, I'm the type of person that I go to art galleries and exhibitions all the time, so it's it's exciting to be a part of this one.
Okay, well, there's one prize that hasn't been announced. It's always announced at the end, which is, you know, the audience favourite.
Yep.
Do you know who you're casting your vote for yet?
I might keep mum on that one.
Okay, right. Private vote, private democratic vote.
Yeah.
And finally, Meyne, you know, what's coming up around the corner for you? Because you're wearing so many hats as usual. This is a year that's probably changed also people's perspective of the kind of work that you can produce too.
Yeah.
But what's on the horizon, and what do you want to be on the horizon for you?
Look, I'm still pursuing the acting thing, but I think that's taken a step to the side because, you know, we're in such a unprecedented times. Look, I think I've been in part of a lot of writing projects this year, in particular, and then we'll see if they come into fruition in the coming years. But I also, you know, there might be a project coming up that I throw another hand into another, you know, pot, which isn't acting or writing, so or painting. So
okay, now my imagination's running wild. Like, what could that possibly be?
Yeah. So you know, I'm pursuing that direction as well.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens.
In my mind, I'm thinking like, it's a performance art, is it circus, contemporary circus work, could be anything.
Yep.
Okay. Look, you did mention just then that it's unprecedented times, and it's obviously why we're doing Art After Hours in a virtual way right now. This year has been particularly hard for different sectors of Australian art. You work in performance art. In the visual art world, it means that galleries can't be as packed as they used to be. What's your take on 2020? What is the state of Australian arts? And, you know, for those of us who want to support the arts in Australia, what should we be mindful of?
That art and transport are considered are placed together in the same thing by the government. I think that's very interesting.
Right. So just to clarify, there is no Department of the Arts. It's mixed together in a super department nowadays on a federal level.
Yeah. So look, I think, you know, think about all the things that happened during this period and that we've all been in lockdown at one point or another. And what have you been watching? What have you been listening to? What have been inspiring to you? It's all got to do with art. You know, it's everything that drives forward with anything that is political, anything that is entertaining. It's got anything to do with art. So I think it's just being mindful of that. And you can understand why there's a big frustration from the arts community when they're not respected on that level.
Yeah. And any words of encouragement or advice for your fellow artists?
I reckon just go for it. You know, if I can be here, you know, like...
And take out the Packing Room Prize in your first year.
Like, you know, go...
Amazing.
Fluking my way. You fake it till you make it. You know, that's what I've been doing. I learn on the job.
Yeah, well, I'm very, very chuffed for you that you've made it in such a huge way this particular year and in this historic year of the Archibald Prize. Congratulations again, Meyne Wyatt.
Thank you.
Okay, the 2020 Archibald Wynne and Sulman Prize exhibition is on display here at the Art Gallery of New South Wales until the 10th of January. Now, obviously, due to COVID-19 restrictions, tickets are timed and are dated with limited numbers per session. So we really, really encourage you to get online, book those tickets in advance so you can plan around that. 2020 is not like any other year, for better or for worse, and that affects so many realms of the arts, including, of course, the Archibald Prize. So get online, book those tickets now. Look, we are currently not open on Wednesday nights, as we usually would be in any other year for Art After Hours, but the Art Gallery of New South Wales is open daily from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Art After Hours is also supported by Macquarie University and the Art Gallery Society of New South Wales. And please stay in. This is the first in several chats for Art After Hours. We'll be talking to artists who have painted a lot of the paintings that you see around us right now. And next week, I'll be chatting with journalist Behrouz Boochani and the artist who painted him for this year's Archibald Prize, Angus MacDonald. I'm Benjamin Law. This has been Art After Hours. Thank you so much for joining us at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. And we hope to see you here in person, and if not, we'll see you back online.